Imagine a real shift, on the global economic map. The U.S. dollar, which has been the heavyweight champ for decades, suddenly facing some, well, serious challenges. How fast could something like that actually happen? Today, that's exactly what we're diving into, the rise of BRICS.
Yeah.
We're here to unpack what BRICS actually is, why it formed, and how it's maybe challenging the dollar's dominance. And yeah, we've got insights from the big players, Modi, Putin, Xi Jinping, even Donald Trump, to give you the whole picture.
Right. And this deep dive, it's really about giving you the essential takeaways. We'll pull out the crucial nuggets of knowledge, help you understand the key parts of this pretty complex geopolitical movement without getting totally bogged down. It's about connecting the dots.
Yeah, get ready to connect those dots, because we've genuinely got some surprising facts, maybe some aha moments that could make you rethink how global power might look in the future. So, okay, let's unpack this. So, first off, the basics. BRICS. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Right.
These are 5 major emerging economies.
Mm-hmm.
And together, they're a pretty formidable group.
Oh, absolutely formidable. I mean, look at the numbers. Collectively, they represent over 40% of the world's population and something like a quarter of global GDP. That's not just a small slice. That's a major piece of the global economic pie right there.
It's funny, though, the term BRIC, without the S, it actually came from an economist, didn't it?
Right.
Back in 2001, Jim O'Neill at Goldman Sachs. Just purely an economic idea at first.
Exactly. It started as just, an investment concept, but it quickly grew into something much more. By 2009, these countries had formalized it. They started having annual summits, coordinating policies.
And then South Africa joined in 2010.
Right, that's when it became BRICS. It shifted from just an acronym to a proper political and economic bloc, a real entity.
And it seems like it's still growing, or trying to. There's been a lot of talk recently about expansion. Countries like Iran, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, they're either interested or being invited into broader cooperation frameworks.
Yeah. And the core reason, the why behind all this, it really boils down to dissatisfaction. Think about it. The global financial system set up post-World War II, largely dominated by the West.
Right. Institutions like the IMF, the World Bank.
Exactly. These emerging nations felt underrepresented. They felt the system wasn't really reflecting their growing weight. So BRICS was partly about pushing back, saying, hey, we need a bigger voice. Or maybe even we'll build our own platform if we have to.
That idea of needing a bigger voice or a new platform, that takes us right to India. Because India's role seems, well, incredibly important, but also really complex. It's the most populous country, fast-growing economy, adds huge weight to BRICS.
Huge weight, yes. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he's been quite vocal in supporting BRICS' development goals, especially things like the New Development Bank, the NDB. That's aimed squarely at funding infrastructure, sustainable projects within these member countries.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's where it gets tricky, right? Because India's in BRICS, pushing that agenda. But it's also a major player in the Quad with the U.S., Japan, Australia. And the Quad is often seen as, well, a counterweight to China. How do they juggle that?
That's the core of the complexity, exactly. While India shares economic goals with BRICS, its relationship with China is tense, especially over those border disputes. That definitely complicates India's position, stops it from being a straightforward leader within the group.
So it's a real balancing act for Modi. He's projecting India as this key balancing force, pushing for reforms inside BRICS tech cooperation, fighting terrorism, but also, importantly, pushing for more trade and local currency. So maybe not the leader in the traditional sense, but absolutely a crucial pillar.
Undeniably a key pillar.
And talking about local currency trade, that leads us to a very concrete example of this whole de-dollarization idea in practice. The rupee-ruble payment system between India and Russia. That really took off after the Ukraine war sanctions, right, as a way to bypass the dollar.
It did. And it's important to note, while BRICS as an organization didn't formally set up that specific deal, the idea behind it, reducing dependence on the dollar, that's pure BRICS ideology. It's a perfect practical example of their aims.
And it's not just India and Russia, is it? This kind of local currency trade seems to be popping up more often within the bloc and with other non-Western countries, too.
That's right. China and Brazil, for example, have settled some major deals using the yuan. It's not just theoretical anymore. It's actually happening. You see it in the trade figure.
Which naturally leads to that next question. There's even been talk, maybe more speculative at this stage, about a common BRICS currency. That would be a massive step.
A huge step. Still very much in the discussion phase, though. Lots of hurdles there.
So all this activity, all this push for alternatives, it brings us back to that critical question I think is on a lot of people's minds. Is the U.S. dollar actually losing its dominance because of BRICS?
Well, The short answer is probably not immediately, but the trend is definitely something to watch very closely. You have to remember, the dollar has been the world's reserve currency for ages, used in, something like 90% of global trade historically.
Oh, it's deeply entrenched.
Extremely. So moving away from that isn't quick or easy, but factors are chipping away at it. Things like sanctions, the perception that the dollar can be weaponized through foreign policy, plus just rising economic nationalism everywhere.
And BRICS is actively pushing that trend.
Oh, actively. They're very deliberately promoting trade in local currencies. You see China pushing the yuan, especially in deals with Africa and the Middle East, Russia doing energy deals in rubles and yuan, India experimenting with the rupee in bilateral deals. It's a coordinated effort, not just random occurrences.
Okay, so summary. Dollar's still king, no doubt. But its grip is loosening. And BRICS is definitely a major factor driving that change.
Absolutely. One of the key drivers.
And these changes, like trading oil in yuan or rubles, they hit at something even more fundamental, don't they? This thing called the petrodollar. Maybe we should quickly explain what that is.
Yeah, that's crucial context. The petrodollar system basically refers to the agreement, largely set up in the 1970s between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, that oil, especially from OPEC countries, would be priced and traded in U.S. dollars.
Which meant everyone needed dollars to buy oil.
Exactly. It created this constant, massive global demand for U.S. dollars. Countries had to hold dollar reserves. It was a huge pillar supporting the dollar's dominance and, frankly, U.S. economic power.
Okay, so that explains its importance. How is that system actually changing now? Are we seeing cracks?
We are, definitely. The most obvious signs are things like China buying oil from places like Iran and Russia using its own currency, the yuan, and reports that even some deals with Saudi Arabia aren't exclusively in dollars anymore. It's not a collapse, but it's erosion.
So the petrodollar system isn't dead yet?
Not dead, no, but it's under pressure. It's being challenged.
And the implications if that system really unravels?
Profound. I mean, if global energy trade significantly moves away from the dollar, that has massive consequences for U.S. economic influence, for global finance. It's a potential game changer.
Which helps explain the tension, right?
Yeah.
Why is the U.S. generally viewed as being, opposed to BRICS? Is it purely economic competition?
It's partly economic, sure, but it's much bigger than that. From Washington's point of view, BRICS represents a fundamental challenge to the liberal world order that the West, especially the U.S., has shaped and benefited from for decades.
Since World War II, basically.
Right. So when BRICS talks about a multipolar world, what the U.S. often hears is, we want to reduce your influence and change the rules. It's about power dynamics, global influence.
And presumably Washington is particularly concerned about China and Russia's role within BRICS, given their more openly adversarial stance towards U.S. hegemony.
Absolutely. Those two are seen as the main drivers pushing an anti-Western agenda within the bloc. But then you add in India's increasing assertiveness, wanting its own independent path, and Brazil under Lula leaning more towards, non-alignment. It creates a bloc that's much less susceptible to U.S. pressure.
So the U.S. opposition isn't necessarily always overt, like a declaration of hostility, but it's there. In policy, in alliances, in economic strategy.
Exactly. It's often subtle, working through alliances like the Quad, through economic policies, through diplomatic pressure. It's about maintaining the existing structure.
Now let's bring in someone like Donald Trump. His whole approach often involves using economic tools like tariffs very directly. How does his view fit into this BRICS dynamic?
Well, he's been very explicit. He said that if he gets back into office, he'd consider increasing tariffs on countries that actively support BRICS or, in his view, undermine U.S. leadership. It's using trade as a direct geopolitical weapon.
Which could have huge consequences. Tariffs or taxes on imports, they disrupt trade. Who might be targeted?
Obvious targets would be countries like China, maybe Russia where possible, perhaps even Brazil, depending on the political climate.
But isn't there a potential irony there?
There really is.
Yeah.
Because while slapping tariffs might play well domestically for some voters, the risk is that it could actually accelerate the very thing he wants to stop. It could push more countries towards alternative systems like BRICS, seeking shelter from U.S. economic pressure. It risks fragmenting global trade even further.
A real potential backfire effect.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to the key leaders within BRICS, the architects, if you will, Modi, Putin, Xi. How do they shape this?
Starting with Modi in India, he brings this interesting mix of pragmatism and Indian nationalism. His goal seems to be positioning India as a major global player, a leading power, but also as a voice for the global South. He navigates this fine line, keeping strong ties with the U.S. while being very active in BRICS, focuses on development, tech, multipolarity.
And Putin. For Russia, BRICS seems almost essential now.
Absolutely essential, especially post-Ukraine sanctions. For Putin, BRICS is a critical geopolitical tool. It's a way to counter Western pressure, find alternative markets, gain investment, get diplomatic support. His alignment with China within BRICS is probably stronger than ever now. It's a lifeline.
And then there's Xi Jinping. China's vision seems perhaps the most expansive.
Arguably, yes. Xi seems to view BRICS as a central piece in a much larger project to fundamentally reorder global governance. You see it with the Belt and Road Initiative, now with BRICS expansion. He wants to build an alternative economic and political architecture where China is clearly at the center. It's a very strategic long-term play.
So even if they have different national interests sometimes, together, these leaders represent a really powerful force pushing for change.
A very powerful coalition, yes. Even with internal disagreements, their collective weight and shared dissatisfaction with the status quo are undeniably reshaping the global landscape.
So bringing this all together, what's the big picture takeaway for someone listening?
The big picture is that the rise of BRICS signifies a real, albeit slow, shift in global power. The dollar isn't suddenly disappearing tomorrow, but its absolute dominance, its invincibility, that's being seriously questioned. The petrodollar system is showing cracks. U.S. policies like sanctions, maybe even tariffs, might actually be accelerating the search for alternatives. And leaders like Modi, Putin, and Xi are actively using BRICS to try and shape what comes next.
So maybe not the end of U.S. dominance just yet, but definitely the rise of a more multipolar world, power being spread out a bit more.
Exactly. It's the emergence of multiple centers of power. And for you, listening to this, whether you're thinking as an investor, a business owner, a policymaker, or just someone trying to understand the world, this means more uncertainty, yes, but also potentially new opportunities. It forces us all to ask, what does this shifting global economy mean for my future, my engagement with the world?
A big question indeed. Definitely something to think about as we wrap up this deep dive.